Okay, it's recording.
Good. I'm going to wait a little bit.
Wait for everybody to get back in. Yeah.
I realized I shouldn't have sent 2 minutes. 1 minute would have been enough.
Yeah. Okay.
It's all right. We're in time. We got this.
Next week, everything will be resolved, I hope.
We're going to work all week to get it resolved.
Yeah. We have tomorrow. Our IT person should be able to fix my account. I don't know what happened.
And I'll not to check in. I don't know what was. I don't understand that at all.
Let me mention that the image of our speaker is rather blurry or out of focus. If there's something
Mine?
Yeah, yours. Yeah, but that's
probably
I think,
my lighting.
Yeah, that's your lighting. It's too bright.
It's
that
too
has
bright.
Nothing to do with the Zoom. That has to do with you have to. Yeah, that's better.
Okay, I'm sorry. I can hang on. Okay, I will. I apologize. I'll try to play with it a little bit more next time. I didn't realize. I thought I needed more light. Okay.
No, it's still too bright.
Still too bright. Really? Is that better?
It's about the same. Okay, a little better. Okay, continue.
Okay.
Should I share the next one?
No. Where were we? We were on the bones. The burial. Okay, so let's look before we go to the other parts of the Torah. Let's look at the forefathers. That's the founding literature. Our story as a family. We're not yet a people. They get a promise, right? God knows we said that enough times every day in our prayers. It is a sort of, that's not okay. They come to Israel. They walk it, reflected in history through pilgrimage, through tours, thousands of ways. The people that want to be there and then be there lots of times. They get buried in Israel, reflected in burial throughout the ages. You can visit. I mean, there's at the temple, there's a gate called Nicanor Gate. Nicanor is a Syrian Jew who was very rich and donated a brass huge set of doors for the temple back when, in the Second Temple times. And not so long ago, in this last century, when playing around with the Mount of Olives cemetery, they discovered Nicanor's grave. Nicanor had his body sent from Syria to Israel for burial. He was a very wealthy Jew. At that time, it's a long practice, and as we talked about also, buying land. That's so clearly reflected in the Zionist early efforts. That was how they decided how their first efforts were. Even while they were trying for political recognitions, they were buying land in the land of Israel. Building altars. How much Jewish money across all the ages came into the synagogues that were in Israel? It's just these things fed their way, and please remember, all these things were reread year by year. But the Torah doesn't end with Genesis. The Torah has 2 more parts. One is less well noted, and we'll do that first, and the second is very well noted. We'll be ending with that basically. So if we can look at number 6 here. Our next section comes from something you probably don't know too well. So let's review it just in terms of your mind. In Leviticus, the Jews are told that there are to be 2 things: a sabbatical year and a jubilee year. The sabbatical year means you don't plant any crops. And there's some indication that slaves, Jewish slaves, can be set free, have to be set free on the sabbatical year. The Jubilee year, which is 7 times 7 years, 49, and probably the 50th, but maybe the 49th, that is a bigger day than the Jubilee. All the slaves go free, all the debts are canceled, and all property goes back to the original owners of the property, tribal, certainly, family if possible. Now, we're going to read about this. We do know that people tried to observe the sabbatical year. We also know that it was also observed in the breach most of the time. We have various complaints in Nehemiah's time and other times that the Jews weren't really doing it, but there was an attempt to do it. That it was a real law and they tried to get it done. Maybe it was done at times. The Jubilee is much more theoretical, and we have no indication if it really, really ever worked. We'll just leave it at that. But what we're interested in right now is the text that was spoken to the Jews that everyone knew about. And the Jubilee is cited later by Ezekiel, which means after the first temple period. Ezekiel's already in Babylonia. They knew about Jubilee, so they know all this history throughout the Bible. Slide 6. The land shall observe a Sabbath of the Lord. All right. Now, I read it slowly because we can read it too quickly. Here, the text says, the land has to have Shabbat like you have Shabbat. Right? Look in the second yellow. In the 7th land, the land shall have a Sabbath of complete rest, a Sabbath of the Lord, complete rest for the land. All right? There is a concept here, which is, to me, sort of mind-boggling, that there is an extent where the land is semi-alive. It has to rest like you do. When the Jews are threatened with exile, if they misbehave, and we're going to read some of that in a little while, one of the sentences there says, you don't have it in front of you, and you're going to go into exile, and then the land will rest and make up for all the years it didn't rest when you were living on it. Right? The land deserves a rest. All right. And then with the Jubilee year, we have another astounding kind of statement of a different kind. The first statement is, it has to rest like you do. You know, when I pause, I digress. The first short story I ever wrote, I wrote a few when I thought maybe I'd be an author. And I guess after I wrote a few, I realized I wasn't going to be an author. But the first short story that I ever wrote had a young man speaking back and forth to the land of Israel, who was responding back and forth to the man. Then it came out of there. Okay, anyway, next, let's go to the Jubilee. You don't care about my short stories. You shall count off 7 weeks of years, 7 times 7 years. All right. Then you have the Jubilee year. Sound, I'm reading the next paragraph, even it's not yellow. Then you shall sound the horn loud in the 7th month, on the 7th day of the month, the day of atonement. The horn is sounded to announce it. Jubilee, Yovel, is another word for horn. So Jubilee is named originally for the horn that is sounded in declaring the Jubilee year, right? And then we'll read about it now. It shall be a Jubilee for you. Each of you shall be returned to your holding, and each of you shall return to your family. Now, you can readily see, I pause, you can readily see this is an agricultural concept. This is not a mercantile society. This is made for people who have homesteads, and homesteads stay, and the attachment to the land is forever. My grandfather was here, etc. It's not going to work forever when Jews move into a business kind of society. But okay, you return and you go back and watch the next. Why? Not because of your agriculture. The land must not be sold beyond reclaim, for the land is mine. You are but strangers resident with me. Here in the middle of the Torah, God says, yeah, I've assigned it to you, but it's not yours. You are alien strangers with me in the land of Israel. Now, oh, I see I'm much less right than everybody else. All you are strangers resident. This was the phrase used. Anybody know who used that phrase? I'm but a stranger resident with you. Nobody? You just spoke out? No, I can't see your face. Okay. That's what Abraham said to the people when he bought the cave of Machpelah. He said, I don't have any rights here. So please sell me this cave so I can have a burial ground. Right? I don't have any rights. And the same phrase is used here as saying to the Jewish people in terms of the Jubilee in the middle of the Torah, the land of Israel doesn't really belong to you. It belongs to me, says God. Okay, Edgar, can you erase this? Here's a great one. I'll take a hand on this. Can anyone think of anything in modernity that reflects this concept that the land doesn't belong to you? It doesn't really belong to you, even if you own it. You'd have to be Israeli and understand.
Yes, so the only way, we don't really own the land we live on. I live on a moshav, and I have no right to the land. I only rent it from the Minhal Mekakei Israel.
And most apartments are on a 49-year lease or a 98-year lease if you're really lucky. In Israel, most of the land, the overwhelming majority, is not owned in the sense that the person has it forever. It is a temporary thing. It is an odd twist. I don't think there are other countries like this. I know America's not, but.
Well, actually, that's what I was going to comment on.
Yeah, what is it?
In the case of federally owned lands in the United States, such as national parks and forests,
yeah,
there are cases with very long-term leases to private parties. Usually they're written for 99 years.
Okay, thank you. That is exactly, and it was on federally owned land, which is kind of different. In Israel, you had this concept of the land belonging to the whole country, or in the Bible, belonging to God, but it is a partial parallel. I thank you. I never thought of it. Absolutely correctly true. But it is, so we have in Leviticus sort of a fascinating, we have these two fascinating, first of all, they talk about land is a living entity, needs its Shabbat. And second, after everything we heard from the forefathers, here in this time, it says the land really doesn't belong to you as an ownership thing. It's temporary or for a period or whatever. So this is all going to fill into the the next the next part, which is perhaps the most fascinating part of the Torah, because it is the most undermining part of everything we said today. So if we'll look at number 7, just number 7, I don't won't do number 8.
Well, a quick comment
Yes.
on the ownership not being absolute. I
Yeah.
think it's paving the way for there being some conditionality here, that if you follow the rules, behave properly, you get to stay. But if you screw up and don't follow the rules, you don't get to stay. Out you go.
Yeah, I didn't pay him to say that, but but that's exactly the introduction to Leviticus 26, our next slide. Thank you. That is absolutely correct. It is the background, and here, smack in the middle of the Torah, and these is a long section, and there's a parallel in Deuteronomy. We could have dealt with lots of texts. I just chose, all right? If you disobey me, there's lots of punishments. You do this, I'm going to punish you this way. You do this, punish this way. You want to get really bad, you shall eat the flesh of your children and the flesh of your daughters. You're not going to kill them, but they're going to die, and that's the only way you'll survive. Carcasses, lifeless fetishes is terrible. Lay your cities to ruin, and then the ultimate punishment, but still there, and I will scatter you among the nations. And then it goes on to say how bad that's going to be. Unsheath the sword against you. The land's going to be desolation. Then when it's all done, and in Kitzur, I mean, before we look at this little footnote here, you can lose the land of Israel. Part and parcel of the Torah literature. If you don't behave properly, you will lose the land of Israel. Now, remember what God said, if you recall, to Abraham. He said, you're not going to get the land because the sin of the Amorites is not yet as bad as it can be, so I can't kick them out. A hint that the land, independent of the Jews, demands wonderful behavior. But here, where God has said, it's my land, you're strangers resident with me, and now says, and if you don't observe, I'll try to punish you on the land. But the ultimate punishment, I will send you off of the land. Okay? That is the most unusual gift ever. If I had assigned you all an essay somewhere and said, tell me how you can give your kids something and make it as complicated as possible and as tricky as possible and gives you full control over everything you've given your kid, but the kid's not supposed to know it, or maybe he will, or whatever. You couldn't come up with something as complex as this. God, I'll give you this land. It's going to be your forefathers. And you can do things, and we develop things to do it, and it will be used, but you're still strangers. It's still mine. All right. It has its own rights. It's holy. The Amorites got kicked out. It's holy. It has to have its Sabbath. But if you really disobey, you won't be here anymore. You're going to be back where Abraham was. You're going to be back where the Jews were in Egypt. Then I will remember, he says at the end. The Deuteronomy is a little like that. It's harder to find there. I will remember my covenant with Jacob. I'll remember my covenant with Isaac. I'll remember my covenant with Abraham. Told every one of them, this is going to be your land, and I will remember the land. I will not reject them and spurn them to destroy them. Annulling my covenant with them, I will bring you back. So you can cut the slide, and we're going to talk about this. This is Torah literature. It is not anything that you can walk into a room and end the debate in 2 sentences by saying, here's the deed, it's mine, I got it. It is like presenting the guy who wants to argue with you and say, this isn't the land, yours is not the land of Israel. You're giving him all these arguments. You're giving him all his arguments, while you have your arguments too. You clearly have your arguments. God promised it. We built the things. We work. We still have our connection. It's we read this story forever and ever. We'll go throughout the story of the history forever, but the story that we have seen is very, very complex. It is not. It is. There's no yes and no. Yes, we own the land of Israel. God gave us the land of Israel. Yes, God can take it away, and we can't say for sure that God will never take it away. I was sitting in a room with a person yesterday who was telling me that we don't have to worry. We're on our way. We can build the third temple. And I said to him, how do you know that God's not angry at us? He brought on this war and he's punishing us and we're going to lose. He said that can't happen. And I said, you don't read the Torah and you don't know your history. It happened twice. I didn't say it was going to happen. I was saying that absolute assurance is not part of our deed. Our deed to the land of Israel, as we have it and as we take it with us, which is a deed, it's in our pocket. We take it with us. But it's a deed that is indeed, indeed complex. Sorry. That the opening Constitution is not a constitution. Constitution is a law system. The opening document, Declaration of Independence of the Jewish people, the Torah, has us with the land of Israel from the first minute to the last minute, with all that complexity. And all that complexity is the basis for which everything else that came afterwards is going to play itself out as it dictates our history. Okay, that is the Genesis and the Leviticus of it all. There's one more thing I want to add. Well, first I want to review. So we have the ways we can relate to the land of Israel without owning it. We have this complex ownership document. And here's what I want to remind you all. We read the Torah every year through. This document, it's not like the Declaration of Independence. I don't think Americans read it more than 4 times in their lives. This one comes with us over and over again. And I want one more aspect of the Torah, which just has to impress the Jews as they go by. The Torah is always on the way to Israel. Not the first 11 chapters, the creation of the world, but the minute you have Abraham, who goes down to Egypt, up and back, and as they move back and forth, the horizon is always Israel. And when you read the last word in Genesis, it says Egypt, you know it's heavy, it's right, crisis, right? And the entire next 4 books of the Bible is only on the way to Israel. We never get there. We are going to Israel through the entire Torah. And when we're at the other side of the Jordan, 1 second, please. Sorry. We are always on, and when we get to the border of Israel, we start all over again. The whole document is moving that way. Yeah? And the last word, even though it technically applies to the people, is Yisrael. It's the last word in the Bible. So we have this in the Torah, El B'nai Yisrael. It is this constant move up, but that very document that we take with us and impresses us so much is telling us, on the other hand, you are a people also independent of Israel. So we are founded Torah literature, this incredible piece with the most complicated ownership document probably ever created. Really, really the most popular. If this is what that document is, if the Torah is to be kind of, we take it with us. It gives us reason to pause. It gives us reason to go back. It has reason to own. It has reasons to pride. It has reasons to give money to visit, to go on pilgrimage, to settle, even to stay. Even that very odd guy, Isaac, who stays, there are a few people in Jewish history who were in Israel and refused to leave because they understood that the highest possible mitzvah was never to leave Israel, even on a trip. That does exist across the Jewish history. So this is the complicated background that we have. We have 5 minutes. I can just say two more sentences unless there's somebody who wants to.
Benjy, you're kind of.
I'm fading?
Yeah, your internet connections. Okay, now you're back.
I told you my connection's weak here. Okay. It may seem strange to you that I said the second section is about Jerusalem, and we will be doing only Jerusalem texts. I will someday tomorrow get them to Etka, and she will nicely get them out to you well before the session for you to peruse at least. Jerusalem at the moment, as its beginning, is a separate issue. Jerusalem has its own development, which will feed very heavily into our concept of what Israel is. It takes certain elements and exaggerates them, and it adds elements that weren't there before. Most specifically, as you can obviously, or you certainly can intuit, is that it's going to add the element of politics and statehood. But it's going to add a whole new thing, and we're going to read through Jerusalem and how it develops through a fairly, maybe even greater number of texts. If it's possible for you, if it's easy, don't worry too much if it's not, to have the text in front of you, because I can only choose parts of them to show on the screen. That's fine. If not, it's fine. But please just peruse them over so they'll be familiar to you. It becomes a complicated issue of its own, rising from nowhere to glory, to total despair of Lamentations, who don't understand why God did this, to a rebirth and it's a wild, wild ride. And we're going to see that as we start to get a broader picture of how we relate to Israel. And I remind you, as I said at the beginning, the word Zion, which is another name for Jerusalem, becomes the name for Israel in our texts from the Siddur and on. Or Chadash al Tzion Ta'ir, cause a new light to shine about Zion. It becomes and ultimately works its way into the Israel movement, which is called Zionism. And we'll start to begin to understand that next time. Okay, I thank you much. Any comments, et cetera, and so forth? Do they have
Carol is raising her hand.
Hi. I just wanted to share, when you were talking about pilgrimage, I went on USY pilgrimage young youth in 1970, and that was my first introduction to Israel. And here I am 41 years after my Aliyah, and that was the pilgrimage that I first had. So the conservative movement has, stayed with me.
Carol, I just missed you. I was a counselor on pilgrimage in 71.
Okay. Rabbi Morheim was my group leader.
Yeah. Okay. So All right, we will
Thank you.
continue next time. I will send, if I didn't send my email, did I? Okay.
I think your email was copied on the letter that I sent to people. I usually
Okay,
copy you on
so
every
please-
letter.
Please feel free, if at any point you didn't say something, you want to challenge, you want to ask, you want to suggest, you have my email. I will promise to read it and if appropriate, respond. Okay,
Also,
so,
please take a look at the letter. I think we might be changing the Zoom link so that we
Okay.
don't have these problems. We might make a new Zoom link that'll be
Yeah.
with an
Okay.
account that's
Thank
Our-
you.
I
unlimited.
apologize and
Yeah, I apologize for this.
may
Thank
we
you.
have better days and may the coming days see progress toward getting all our hostages home.
Amen, amen.
Amen, amen.